She's over there.
Oh, and you have the live stream going?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Some of you may have already, several of them you know from Women's League, right? This is the Girl Scout code for being quiet. Hey? Okay. Okay. We're very pleased to have Sandy Berenbaum here with us today. She was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany, came over to the United States at age 2.5. And I understand that initially you didn't talk about your experiences that much, because some women who knew you did not know.
Right.
And I mean, women here
Right.
did not know your story. And Sandy originally came over, started in Boston, then to New York, and wound up in Philadelphia. She's a member of TI in Bensalem, and she's been an officer of Women's League, the Sisterhood president, in the Philadelphia branch of Women's League for Conservative Judaism, former International Women's League Vice President, and a past Mid-Atlantic Region Vice President of United Synagogue. And there's even more here, but I sent an attachment to my email with her bio, which she nicely provided. And Sandy's daughter, Edie, who is a longtime congregant, is here today, which your mother did not know. She said, "Isn't she working?" So, okay, so I am giving the floor to Sandy, who's going to fill in the blanks.
Thank you, Eileen. Can everyone hear me okay? If you can't hear me, just raise your hand. It's so nice to be in my second home. OHEV is very important to me, and I appreciate your inviting me here to Janie Perlstein's Women's Study Group. It's also so nice to see Barb and my daughter.
Yeah.
You know, you usually don't see them together. It's like Superwoman. They might be the same person. And it's so nice to see so many old friends and meet some new friends as well. And I'm excited to share my room with Eileen at Women's League Convention. We're leaving on Sunday. And Michelle is the madricha for convention. So we have a wonderful group here, and Idel is also a member of my sisterhood. So before I begin with my PowerPoint, I would just like to share some of my thoughts with you. And also, I would like to share my Aunt Tanya's story. I was born in the aftermath of destruction into a world where everything had been lost, and yet somehow life began. Today, we gather to remember the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust and to honor the lives, the communities, and the futures that were taken from us. And my daughter makes me cry all the time. I stand before you as a child of survivors, born in a displaced persons camp in Pocking, Germany. For my parents and so many others, liberation was not the end of their suffering. It was the beginning of a new kind of uncertainty. The displaced persons camps were overcrowded with limited food, little privacy, and fragile hope. People who had lost everything were waiting. They were left waiting. Waiting for a place to go, waiting for the world to respond. In 1945, the Harrison Report exposed harsh and often inhumane conditions in these camps, urging the world to take action. It would take time, but eventually doors began to open, offering families like mine a chance to rebuild. And even in those very difficult conditions, life continued. Families were formed. Children were born. I was one of them. This is where my story begins, and you'll excuse me for getting emotional. This is so important to me that this is how I express my emotion. Today, because we are remembering is not passive. It's an active responsibility. If we forget history, we risk repeating itself. So today we remember, we bear witness, and we commit ourselves to speaking out against hatred, anti-Semitism, and indifference wherever it exists. May the memories of those we honor today be a blessing, and may we always find the strength to remember and to act. Now, my Aunt Tanya is 8 years older than I am. She lives in Chicago. I always ask her questions, and she doesn't always remember things. Her experience was so horrific that she suppressed a lot of her memories. So this is what I'm going to read to you are a few things that she does remember. And oftentimes, a lot of survivors don't speak about their experiences because they were so horrific that in order to survive, they have to suppress those memories. So I would just like to share a few of her memories with you. I was born in Kiev, Ukraine, which at that time was part of Russia. When I was 3 years old, the Germans invaded Ukraine. We were warned by the Russian government to leave Kiev for our own safety. All our important papers were left behind, such as birth certificates and my parents' marriage license. We only took the bare necessities. There were 5 of us: my mother, my father, my sister, and my brother. Our destination was to get away from Kiev as far as possible and away from the Germans. We traveled by train and were attacked by bombs. When this occurred, the train would stop and we'd hide in ditches. This was terrifying. I don't recall this, but this was conveyed to me later by my family. We went through many small villages and spent most of the war in Kazakhstan, which is an Asian country and former Soviet republic. We ended up living in a small one-room hut with no running water. It was very primitive. In order for us to survive, my mother, who was a seamstress, and my father, who was a tailor, would go into the towns and do sewing in exchange for some bread and fruit. Needless to say, we were always hungry and malnourished. We came down with all kinds of diseases and miraculously survived. There were no doctors to visit or call. In 1944, my father had a massive stroke and died. That's my grandfather. That's my mother's father. This was just 1 year before the war ended. He and my mother were in one of the villages looking for work when this occurred. My poor mother had to go through this all alone. After the war ended, my mother decided we would go to America, as she had a big family in the States. She had no desire to remain in Russia, as there was nothing left for us there. We left Russia in 1945 and did much moving around. We first went to Poland, passed through Czechoslovakia, to Austria, where we remained for a month. We then came to Germany, to a place called Fritzlar by Kassel, and remained there until 1948. This was a displaced persons camp. We had to go to Germany in order to come to the United States. Can you imagine how it felt to be in a country that killed so many Jews? Think about that. I did not have any schooling until we came to the camps. There, they set up classes for the children, and we learned the basics. We also had Hebrew classes, as many families were going to Israel. Life in the camps was much better. We had food, medical care, and were safe. We also started to receive packages from our relatives in the States. The packages contained some canned food and fabrics. From these, my mother, my grandmother, was able to sew clothes for us. We remained in this camp until 1949. Then we moved to Ulm and Bremenhofer, from where we boarded the Captain Blatchford ship and were on our way to America. So think about those things for a few minutes. And what I'd like to do now is share my PowerPoint. Am I blocking anyone? Is that awesome? I'll come on this side.
Take the microphone with you.
Okay, I don't want to block anyone. Eileen, I'm sorry.
That's as far as it's strong.
Huh? I can go. Okay. It's not working. Oh, there we go. Okay. My mother was born in Kiev, and this is my grandmother. Let's see if this works. Yeah, this is my grandmother. This is my grandfather who had the stroke and passed away. This is my mother, who Edie is named after. And this is my great-great-grandmother, Toiba. And this is in Ukraine. They lived in a small apartment with another family. They didn't live alone. They shared an apartment with another family. Can you imagine? At that time, that was only my mother. She already had my Aunt Tanya and my Uncle Eddie. So there were 5 of them, 6 maybe, sharing an apartment with another family. This is a map of Germany, and every dot that you see is where a displaced persons camp was. And this is where I was born, Pocking, Pine City. It was also called Waldorf. And each section of Germany was divided by a different country. It was divided by the British, the French, International, the Soviets, and the United States. So all of those areas indicate who controls that part of the camp. Do you have any idea why? And if you know the answer, if I've told you this before, don't say anything. Do you have any idea why Germany was divided into all those sections? No, if you know the answer, you can tell it now. Edie, you don't know? She never listens to me. Yeah, no, kids, I'll tell you. Germany was divided into all those different areas by the different countries because they did not want Germany to have the power that they had prior to World War II. That is why they were divided into different sections. And the conditions in the camps were horrific, and I'll go into that in a little bit. As I said, my mother came from Kiev. My father was born in Malava, which is a town in Poland, not far from the German border, part of the Warsaw Peninsula, near Lodz. The town had tailors, they had bakers, they had doctors, they had farmers, they had a little bit of everything. And a lot of the people were very educated, and they had a Zeitung, a newspaper, and this was a picture of the editorial board in Malava. Okay. How many of you know Harriet Levin? Okay, Harriet Levin is a very, very good friend of mine. She's family to me. This gentleman, Ilya Solarski, is Harriet's grandfather. Harriet's grandfather, her father, and my father grew up on the same street in Poland. So we go back many, many, many years. And when I was about maybe 6 or 7, my parents took us on a trip, my brother and I, a big trip that was big back then, to a chicken farm. And we stayed overnight, and it was Harriet's parents' chicken farm. Now, fast forward maybe 30 some odd years, and we joined Tifereth Israel. And my husband Dave would say to me, we have to get together with this couple. We have to get together with this couple. He was on the men's club baseball team. And I'd go, I'll call, I'll get around to it. So one day I called Harriet, and I said, Dave and Mark play baseball together, and it would be nice if we got together for dinner. And we started talking, and I said, what is your background? And she said, my father was from Poland. I said, oh, my father was from Poland. I said, where in Poland? She said, Malava. I said, my father was from Malava. I said, what is your maiden name? She said, Solarski. I said, is your grandfather Ilya? She said, how do you know? I said, when my father would come here to visit us, he would always call your grandfather, and your grandfather would come to my apartment. Little did I know that this was Harriet from the chicken farm. So Harriet and I go way, way back. This is a picture of men in the Polish army. This is my old neighbor, Leo Perlstein. They live downstairs from us. Jews back then weren't treated that great in Poland. They weren't treated well in Russia either. We had the pogroms. My great uncle was murdered in front of my grandmother and my great-grandmother. You know what a pogrom means? A pogrom is chaos. And they would come into the villages and beat up Jews and attack them so badly that they died. This is a picture of the ghetto wall after liberation, and they would line people up and shoot them here. And you see how high it is, and there's no way, it's very difficult to escape that. This is a picture of my father's family. This is my Aunt Friedel, my Aunt Shana Esther, my Uncle Herbie, my father, Jack Yaakov, my Uncle Fischel, and my Aunt Chaya. These are my grandparents on my father's side. My grandfather Avram Shia and my grandmother Sura, who I was named after, and my Uncle Herbie. That's a picture of my Uncle Herbie, Herschel, my father. That's my father and my uncle. My father is saying goodbye to my uncle. My uncle was about 18 years old, 19 years old, and he was sent to the United States to live with my Uncle Sam. And the reason that my grandparents sent him to the United States was they did not want him to be inscribed into the Polish army because they knew he would be treated poorly. So that's my father saying goodbye to my uncle. This is um, my uncle was about 18 or 19 there. And when he came to the United States, he joined the Army, and he was stationed in Alaska for the duration of the Army, yeah. This is my parents in Pocking. My mother, Ida, who Edie's named after. My father, Jack, who was Yaakov. This is my mother. That's part of me. That's probably the better part. And my father. In November of 1942, all the Jews in Poland were rounded up. They were either murdered on the spot, sent to concentration camps, or slave labor camps. Now, why do you think the Nazis invaded Poland first? I'm sorry.
So many Jews.
So many Jews. Have you ever heard of the Hillebrand system? Okay. Do you know that IBM, yeah, you're shaking your head. IBM had a punch card system they created called the Hillebrand system, and it was used for a census. So the Nazis had the location of every Jew in Poland, where their businesses were, where the schools were, the educators, where everyone lived. So it was so easy for the Nazis to come in and round up every single Jew. Think about that. We have a census system here. Can you imagine if the government all of a sudden picked on, which they have, a certain group of individuals? Can you imagine what it would be like? And you know, they say that the Jews went to their slaughter like lambs. We didn't have guns. We were peaceful people. And they invaded at night when everyone was more vulnerable. Think about that. Think about how it could happen here. So that's why they invaded Poland first. This is a picture of my father's family. As you see, these are my aunts and my uncles, my grandparents, my cousins. This is my cousin Hamel and his wife Lena. Out of everyone in this photograph, 80, they were all murdered. 81 members of my family were murdered. And you can see how young those children were. I would have cousins that would be just a few years older than myself. How many of you were robbed of family because you were Jewish? This is a picture of a memorial in Poland, and it says, Lizchor Kehila Malava, remember the community of Malava. And that's dedicated to the martyrs. My father was a prisoner in a Nazi slave labor camp. And one of the camps he was in Komi, SSR, Siberia. And this is a declassified document showing where he was in that camp. It's Komi, SSR, Siberia. They had approximately 125 slave labor camps. My father was a kamashamacher, a leather maker, and he made shoes and leather goods. And this is a pattern of the shoes that he made. He was very meticulous with everything that he did. He made my plastic slipcovers years ago, and when you sat down, you couldn't get up because the pillows stuck to you. Remember, Edie? Yeah. This is the timeline of the camps that we were in. We went from, well, this was right before I was born, from Siberia to Golovchenko to Kazakhstan. Does Golovchenko ring a bell to anyone? No? This is the first city in Ukraine that the Russians bombed in the war that's still going on. So from there, they went to Waldenburg. The borders would change from time to time, so it was Germany and Poland, Poland and Germany. From there, they went to Lower Silesia, to Austria, to Pocking, where my story begins, to Ulm, to Fritzlar, to Bremen, and I found out that we were also in Butzbach. I found a document recently, which I didn't know. So we went from camp to camp to camp. Now, this will give you an idea of the distance from Golovchenko, former Russia, all the way to the American sector in Germany. They traveled 1,277 miles, 77 and 3/4 miles to the American zone in Germany. And that was by train, by foot, by any means of transportation they could find. And my father knew that if we got to the American sector, we would be able to emigrate to the United States. This is a picture of my parents. It's my dad, my grandmother, who at that time was a widow, my mother, my Uncle Eddie, my Aunt Tanya, and smiley face. Now, we lived in this displaced persons camp. It was barracks. We lived in a former Nazi sub-concentration camp. How do you think it felt to live in Nazi barracks? Messerschmitts were made there. The conditions were deplorable. You had no privacy. You've all heard of General Patton. He was the biggest anti-Semite. He thought that the Jews were worthless, that we had nothing of value, and he treated us like the Nazis treated us. The only difference was he didn't kill us. And more than one family lived in a room. Disease was rampant. Typhus, typhoid fever, diphtheria, lice, everything that you could imagine. And if you got sick, could you imagine what it would be like being treated by a German doctor? You couldn't trust them. And even though we were free, we really were not free because we were behind barbed wire. And the American soldiers cared more about maintaining a relationship with the citizens than they were about caring for the displaced persons. You know, my aunt, one of the memories, because I keep prodding her, she remembered that a woman in the town wanted some sewing done. So my grandmother and my aunt went to her house. And remind you, we had a curfew. She went to their house, and You know how the back of your hair, the back of the hair on your neck stands up? My grandmother felt very uncomfortable when she walked in. And the woman said to her, she closed the door, and she said, "Are you a Jew?" And my grandmother took my aunt, and they got out of there as fast as they could. This is a document requesting a long-term visa to stay in Germany until we were able to come to the United States. Here is my paternal grandfather's name, Avraham. My maternal grandfather's name, Gregor, who Gregory is named after. My great-grandmother's name. And these documents show that we are not criminals also. They had a background check. So we were profiled to make sure that we didn't have any criminal activity. I must have been having a tantrum or a bad day. Thank you. Now I'm old. I think I was about 2, maybe. Yeah. And as you can see, my name is Sarah Goldwasser. Not Sandra, not Sandy. My given name was Sarah. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later. And this document shows that I have been vaccinated. Once wasn't good enough, it was twice. And that I had all the vaccinations for typhus, typhoid, tuberculosis. Tuberculosis was very big in the camps. This document is in one of the camps also. It shows that I am a registered official displaced person. Whoops, let me go back. Here's my name. And in January 1949, I'm officially a displaced person. And this was November 2nd, 1946. This document was issued on January 1949. So I was less than 2 weeks old, and I was already documented as a displaced person. This is a medical document showing that my father had been discharged from the hospital because he had tuberculosis. And he suffered with some of the ramifications from tuberculosis. You can get tuberculosis anywhere in your body. My father had tuberculosis in his leg. Remember, Poppy walked with a limp. Yeah. You know, there were so many displaced persons camps, foreign-walled.
That's where Ellen was. That's that one and Perlstein.
Right.
They're together on the bottom.
Yeah. I recently met someone. Her name is Esther Blank. She was from Feldafing. She lived in Feldafing for 7 years. Foreign-walled was the largest displaced persons camp in the American sector. And you can see that each area was named after a state in the United States: Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, Missouri. I can't see upside down. Yeah. And on the right, the Joint Distribution Committee handed out songs for Hanukkah. One side is in Yiddish, and the other side is in Hebrew, one phonetically, and the other is in Yiddish. This is a picture of my mother and I in one of the little towns outside of the camp. And I don't know if you can see that, the boots that I'm wearing. Can you see them? Okay. Remember I said my father was a Kamashemacher shoemaker? I tell you've seen this before. These are the boots that my father made. This is the trade that kept him alive. And these are the shoes that I wore first steps in the United States. I'll leave them here for you to see. And they smell not from my feet, they smell from humanity and the age of the leather. I'm going to be 80 years old. So these are about 78 years old. And my father was meticulous. The detail on these shoes is amazing. And those are the boots. They look very big there, but you can see how little they are. This is a picture of the survivors from Malava after the war. This is in 1945. And this gentleman right here in the white hat, that's my father. Can you imagine? There were approximately 6,000 Jewish people living in Malava, and this is part of what's left. Hard to imagine. I'm trying to think of what city has a population of about 6,000 people that would be completely wiped out. This is a picture of the ship that I came on. For years, I would say to my father, "Daddy, what ship did we come on?" He said, "We came on the Marina Fleischer." Forever and ever and ever, I tried to find information on the Marina Fleischer. Well, guess what? There's no such animal because my father spoke with a Yiddish accent. And it's the SS Marine Flasher. So this is a picture of the ship.
How much get the money to come?
I'm sorry?
How much you get the money to get on that boat? How much did it cost, do you think?
I don't think it cost, I'm not sure. That's a very good question, Michelle. I never thought about that. I don't know.
You were sponsored by somebody.
Well, we were sponsored by someone, but I don't know if there was a fee. You know what? I'm gonna have to research that. That's a very good question. Thank you. And this was a troop transport ship. This ship, this is a map of one of the tours that the Marine Flasher did. It was used to transport troops to the European front. So this was steerage. It was not a luxury liner. And the conditions were very bare and miserable, overcrowded. There were maybe 1,000 people on the ship. And I had mentioned the Harrison report earlier. When you ask my one grandson, or Edie's probably sick of hearing it, and my family too, my favorite president was Harry Truman. Because Gail knows, he created the quota to allow people to come to the United States. And he sent Earl Harrison, who was at that time the president of the law school of the University of Pennsylvania, to form a commission to investigate the conditions in the camps. So I am very grateful to Harry Truman because I would not be here without him. I'm going to show you a short video. Oop. Oh, what did I do?
I got you, Sandy.
Did I erase it?
Let's see.
There it is. You have to press escape and then the box.
You should be able to hit play, but
Let me go down.
here, I'll scroll down.
There it is. Yeah. It says to watch video, press escape and then click the box. Okay. Thanks, Barb. We arrived April 5th, 1949, and many immigrants landed in New York. We landed in Boston. That's because they didn't want New York to be a Jewish state full of immigrants. So any city in the United States that had a port, Miami, Texas, Boston, Maine, Maryland, California, Jews traveled through different ports in the United States. We traveled, we landed in Boston, and from Boston, we came to New York, where my Uncle Herbie had sponsored us. Now, my Uncle Herbie lived in a one-bedroom apartment with his wife and my two cousins, Ronnie and Stanley. So we didn't really have any place to go. We couldn't live with my Uncle Sam, so we wound up living in a boarded-up store. The windows were painted black so that no one could see in. And we lived there for months. My father, my mother, and my grandmother went to night school to learn English. And my father, within a month or so, became a foreman in a factory. And once he was able to save up enough money, we moved to an apartment in Brooklyn. And this is the ship manifest that shows that we are Jacob Goldwasser, Yaakov, my mother Ida, and myself. And can you see that it says Polish? Do you have any idea why we're all listed as Polish? My mother was from Kiev. My father was from Poland. I was from Germany. Does that seem a little odd to you? When Stalin was in power, hi, come on in. Come on in. Hi, Alan. Hi, Rita. Nice to see you guys. How are you? When Stalin was in power, he also did not like the displaced persons. He felt that they were political activists against Russia and that they were lowlives. And also the Russian forces were depleted. So he wanted people to come back to Russia and be a workforce. And also some of the displaced persons who he thought were dissidents would go to jail. And my father knew that the Russians were going to, My father knew that the Russians were going to close the borders. That's why they went to the American sector. So this is the ship manifest telling you why we're listed as Polish and not Russian. I'm sorry?
I said your father was very smart.
My father was very smart, very well educated, very well rounded, and a lot of fun. He was like Peck's bad boy. And I did not mention my Uncle Eddie, who was in the pictures earlier. He was like Peck's bad boy. If he thought that you were a German collaborator, a Nazi collaborator, he would steal your bike and sell it for money. So this is a ship manifest, and it says that we are going to New York, and that we were sponsored. This is the place where my Uncle Herbie lived. That's his name right there. And when we came to the United States, my uncle's wife, my Aunt Lorraine, said, "You're in America now. You have to be American." So Yaakov, Yasha, my father, became Jack. My mother, Ida, became Edith. And myself, Sarah, became Sandra. Now, when I was in 7th grade, I was called down to the principal's office. You know, you're 13, 14 years old. I was shaking in my shoes. Why am I going to be called to the principal's office? I didn't do anything. I'm not my brother. My brother did things, but I didn't do anything. You know why they called me down? They wanted to know if I spoke English. Do you know how humiliating that is? I've been in the school system, New York school system, PS 108, from the time I was in kindergarten through high school, and in 7th grade, you're calling me down to find out if I speak English. That is so degrading and humiliating. Can you imagine how immigrants today feel and how people treat them? That they're not smart because they can't speak the language? That they're less than us? It's a disgrace. Remember the picture of the Polish soldier? Every year they would have a reunion of sorts. And this is Leo Perlstein, the Polish soldier that you saw earlier. And here's my dad. And if you were in the area, this is an invitation to a dinner for the Molavaites. And I don't know if anyone knows who David Opatoshu was. He was a very famous Jewish actor. He was one of the honored guests there. And the dinner cost $1.50. You can't go to the dollar store for $1.50 anymore. This is a memorial service in honor of the martyrs who were murdered. There's Harriet's grandfather again, Ilya. And this is a reunion of sorts in Pocking after the war. Each year, usually around Kristallnacht, this one happened in January, but every year around November 9th, there would be a gathering of all the survivors of Malava. Wherever you live, my father lived in Brooklyn, so this was the New York Malavaites, the Grinas. And as you can see here, my father, Yaakov Goldwasser, he was in charge of the memorial, and he would do Kaddish for all of the Malavaites who passed. He led the ceremony. You know, people ask me about revenge. You know, a lot of people think revenge is served on a silver platter. This is my revenge. This is my family. This is my grandson Sam, my soon-to-be grandson Jacob, and my granddaughter Julia, who will be getting married in September. My grandson Ryan, my grandson Aiden, my granddaughter Jenna, her boyfriend Matt, my husband Dave, my son Danny, my son-in-law Alan, who's like a son to me. And I don't know who that is. She just photobombs everything and itself. You're such a photo hoggy. You know, with everything that my father went through, he never was bitter. He was determined to be a survivor, not a victim. And He was just an amazing, amazing man. He was always smiling, always telling jokes in Yiddish to people who didn't understand Yiddish and then laugh at the punchline. Remember? He was just the most amazing person. And let me see if this will work. Barb, this is a video.
Peace in the world, in hell, and everybody. It's the best thing. Peace in the world is the most important thing. I wish my grandchildren the happiness and peace in the world, in hell, and everybody. It's the best thing. Peace in the world is the most important thing.
That was at Edie and Alan's wedding 35 years ago. And with everything that my father went through, all the things that he suffered, the most important thing to him was good health for everyone, happiness and peace in the world. So, does anyone have any questions for me? Yes, Alan.
Since I came in with a second, what did your father do for a living when you got here? This is what he did back.
Okay, my father was a kamashamacher, which in English is a leather worker, shoemaker. He became a manager in a factory. He worked for the Ohio Bag Company, and he made novelty bags. He also, I forgot to bring it, we all know who Louis Vuitton is. He made a sample Louis Vuitton clutch for me, which I still have, and it's fabulous. I should have brought it, I forgot it. But he made all kinds of beach bags and novelty wear. He was so creative. I don't have an ounce of his creativity. Anyone else have a question? Yes, Fran?
The documentation, the pictures, I'm just astounded how you have all of that. I mean, did your family,
The reason that we have those pictures are they were sent to my family in the United States. That's why we have them. Anyone else? Yes, Lee?
When did you move to Bensalem or Richboro?
I never lived in Bensalem. I lived in Brooklyn, New York, in a section called Highland Park, which was borderline Brooklyn, Queens. And when I met my husband and we got married, Dave was in the Navy, and I wrote to him for 2 years before we met. When he came home, we knew each other after writing for 2 years, got engaged, got married, and Dave said to me, "Where do you want to live?" I said, "Well, you're working. I can get a job anywhere. So we'll live where you live in Philadelphia." So when we got married, I moved from Brooklyn to Philly. And we lived in Philadelphia in the Northeast and joined TI. We had joined another synagogue, but they unfortunately closed. So then we joined TI, and we're founders of the building. So when we moved to Richboro in 1979, we never changed synagogues. And I feel like Ohev is my second home. I am very fond of Rabbi Perlstein. And I think your new rabbi, Rabbi Kling Perkins, is wonderful. And I feel very much at home because I know so many of the members here. And, my daughter belongs here, and her bestie, Barbara. Yes.
so you didn't touch on like religious life in the displaced persons camp. I know your family's Orthodox, so did they continue, I have a two-part question. Did they continue with that? Like, what was religious life like? And then when you got here, because from what I heard, a lot of people will turn more secular because they don't want anything to do with Judaism at that point.
Yeah. No, yeah. There were synagogues created in the displaced persons camps. So we had cheder, we had Hebrew classes. I grew up in a kosher home. We belonged to Temple Sinai in Brooklyn. That was my home away from home. And we kept the holidays. We kept kosher. So it wasn't anything out of the ordinary for us. Synagogue was always a part of my life. Kashrut was always a part of my life, celebrating the holidays. You know, nothing ever...
Your parents didn't say, forget it?
No, no.
Experience?
No, not at all. Not at all. A lot of survivors got mad at God, or they had survivor's guilt. If we go back, let me go back. Okay. My cousin Hamel and his wife Lena. My cousin Hamel's sons, they live in Germany. They still live in Germany. I can't understand how a Jew can live there. They have a very successful... Hamel is no longer living, but his son David has a very successful restaurant catering company. His brother Marek was the biggest concert promoter in Europe, very big. And his son is I don't know if he still is, the president of Sony Records in Europe. His wife, Lena, when they were in Russia, they had a small child, and they had no food, and the baby died. Well, after the war, she got pregnant with my cousin Marek, and they have a sister, Feli, who lives in Israel. I have a lot of cousins in Israel. My cousin Yaakov Butnick, my cousin Ron Butnick. She had survivor's guilt. After she gave birth to one of her children, she tried to jump out of the window. Now, I had another cousin, Surla. We used to celebrate Passover with them all the time, my cousin Rachmiel and my cousin Surla. My cousin Surla did jump out of her window and she killed herself. Some survivors had such guilt that they felt that they were better off dead than living. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Were displaced persons camps 100% Jewish? Because
No. That's a very good question, Eileen. At some point, there were people in the displaced persons camps who collaborated with the Nazis. You can imagine what it was like. Not until Harry Truman sent Earl Harris to investigate the conditions did things change where the Jews were separated from anyone who was a collaborator. Very good question, Eileen. Anyone else? Well, I have some questions for you. This is just food for thought. How do you think it felt for Jewish families to go to Germany after the war ended so they could emigrate to the United States or Israel? Not good. What does the phrase "never again" mean to you today? What challenges do you think survivors faced even after they were freed? Can you think of a situation today where people are forced to leave their homes? What small actions can make a difference in someone's life? What is one way you can stand up to intolerance and injustice? What responsibilities do countries or individuals have toward displaced persons? Why is it important to listen and to preserve survivors' stories? How can learning about the past help people make better choices today? So that's food for thought I'd like to leave you with. And I have to say thank you to Lisa Marlowe and the Holocaust Awareness Education Museum and Education Center who made me coming here today possible. And if you would like to visit the Holocaust Awareness Museum, it's located at KI in Jenkintown. And I have some pamphlets here if you'd like to take them. It's a small museum, but they have some artifacts there. And it's an interesting place to see. It's inside the synagogue. It's on the second floor. They have an elevator, so if you have trouble walking, it's not bad. Yes, Eileen?
Was that one that was started by Jacob Riz?
Yes.
He was my teacher at Big School. I work in the circle.
Yeah. It's the oldest Holocaust museum in the United States. Yeah, it started in his house, yeah. So I really encourage you to go there. And I encourage you to talk to your children and your grandchildren until they're bored to death. Because one day, when we're not here anymore, they may be sorry, like I am, that I didn't think about asking my family a lot of questions. So it's very important to document your history, to be kind, to show respect to someone who doesn't speak the language. You know, they might be afraid, so a little kindness goes a long way. And if you'd like to hear a little bit more of my story, I did an interview with Mainline Television. You can look it up on YouTube, Sandy Goldwasser Berenbaum, or you can take one of these cards if you like and just put your camera on the QR code and you'll see a little bit of history. And I thank you all for inviting me here today. Yes, Eileen.
I'm a little puzzled by your experience in 7th grade when there were so many Jews in New York and still in New York. And you were in the 7th grade and the principal could have seen records. Where did you come up with this?
You know, I can't answer that. You have to remember in the 60s, Jews were not allowed in country clubs. They were not allowed in many places. And maybe the principal was anti-Semitic. I don't know. I can't answer that. But
It's possible that someone in the school who did not feel too good about Jews said something to the principal, because if all he had to do was say hello to you in the hallway, he would know that.
exactly.
I think somebody said something to him, and he said, oh, okay, well, do you know that he asked other students in the school the same question?
I don't know.
But of all questions that ask, of all questions that ask, these questions.
You know, I don't know what his mindset was, so I really can't answer that. But, you know, think about how immigrants are treated today. And, you know, it just goes to show you that there is a lot of ignorance and understanding, people who don't understand in this world today. Anyone else? Yes, Lori.
The names in her family are named for your kids, right? A lot of the names are very similar.
My daughter Julia is named after my grandfather.
My grandson,
Isn't Sam?
Sam is named after.
two Yeah. And my grandson Aiden is named, his Hebrew name is Benjamin Yitzhak, and his middle name is after my Uncle Eddie. And my Aunt Tanya is named after my great-great-grandmother Toiba. Yeah.
What was Alan's mother's name?
Toiba.
Alan's mother's name was Toiba.
Yeah.
I have a question for Dan. Alan spoke to the congregation, and he did not, the expectation was that he would talk about his experience and not one word.
He has always been very private about that. He does share that with people who we know from our Opus group, because he's just child and his mother. There's two DP camps that on that picture that she showed that big picture of her, and that was one of the camps they were in. They've also were in Philadelphia. I don't know the name of the ship they can look on, but Alan has the manifest like you have with the names.
So he goes and talks like you do, but they're not about his personal experience.
He talks about his speaker, and he had a speaker who is no longer with us. Danny Goldsmith, he was with the panic, and he spoke for the Jewish War Veterans Post in the Allen's program, and they went all over to schools and everywhere, any community members, whatever, to talk about his experience as a kid and child.
Well,
He never really spoke about himself, mainly because he doesn't remember a lot about his experiences. His mother was a very good person, very, very affected by losing her entire family. She wasn't in shtetl at the time.
well, maybe you should revisit that and ask Alan specifically what you would like him to speak about.
He would have to work up.
Yeah. Anyone else? Well, I thank you so much for listening. It was my pleasure. And if I can get a picture with everyone, if it's okay to post on Facebook.
I want to thank you. I learned a lot that I did not know. And this is a very small token of our appreciation of you coming and speaking. Yes, you can open it.
Can everybody get the stand? Get a picture. Gather around the Torah table, squat with me.
Dedicate for somebody. No, I